Good evening, everyone. Testing, testing. It is now 6 o'clock in the town hall in the city of Colchester, and I think we are streaming live, which is good news. And we also have Councillor Corey joining us remotely, which is wonderful. Okay, well, welcome to the first scrutiny panel meeting of the new municipal year. Good to see members of the public, visiting councillors here, and no doubt lots of folks online watching. There are no practice evacuations planned this evening, but if an alarm does sound, then please evacuate in an orderly fashion down the main staircase or the side staircase and rendezvous at the meeting point in the back of the town hall in the car park. This meeting is being streamed live over the internet and we can all watch it in the future. If your phone goes off, then you'll be fined, and that money will go to Mike Lilly, the Mayor's charities. We'll have a break at 7:30 if necessary. I'm Councillor Darius Laws, I'm the chairman, and I'm also one of the three councillors that represents rural North Ward, the northern villages of Colchester. Let's have some introductions, and I note we have some substitutions tonight, so if you could just explain who you're here for if you are substituting, that would be great. Starting up then with Councillor McCarthy.
Good evening, Councillor McCarthy representing Shrub End Ward and substituting for Councillor Vanessa Moffat.
Councillor Natalie Summers, St Anne's St John's Ward, substituting for Councillor Paul Smith.
Councillor Claire Osborne, Shrub End Ward.
Councillor Kaylee Rippingale representing Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Councillor Thomas Rowe representing rural North Ward.
Lucy Bredman, support for the board.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
Dennis Willits, Lexington and Braeswick Ward.
Chris Pearson, portfolio holder for economic development and transformation.
Thanks, folks, and thank you. Good to see new councillors here. Scrutiny panel is an exciting place to be, and you're going to have fun, that's for sure. We have no urgent items this evening that I'm aware of. This is an opportunity to declare any interests. I'm not aware of any. I see none. Minutes from meetings held on 11th of February and 27th of February. On my sheet there, that's not accurate, is it? Because we've already done that in the previous meeting. That's okay, not a problem. Then we'll move on to General Have Your Say. We have a member of the public, Mr. Alan Short. Mr. Short, you're welcome to come up to the hot seat, sir.
Alan Short, here about a subject that seems to have gone on forever. I was promised by the past two chairs of this committee, both of whom are here tonight, our former MP, the current leader of the Conservative group when he was leader of the council, that there would be an inquiry into the alumno planning disaster. This costly and embarrassing disaster was to be investigated so that we could learn the lessons of how this was handled by the Cabinet planning officers and Amphora Trading. I think Will Quint said to me, there will have to be an inquiry into this matter. I've been told once again that this cannot be done for legal reasons. I have sought this committee to undertake this investigation and have been told that there are legal issues preventing this. I must point out that the legal advice has been prepared by those directly involved in the key issue of the development. And I have urged the committee to seek individual advice from an independent legal source. At the centre of the case is the agreement signed on February 2018 by Councillor King and Officer Weavers, who were personally in charge of the project. I have been told that other councillors who have been privileged to see that contract says it contains worrying clauses, but they cannot tell me what they say. I have now had a second verbal conversation about the Cabinet meeting from a then member of the Cabinet, for which the public was specifically excluded, where one of the Cabinet members spoke eloquently about their frequent communication on their own with the developer. This is the second separate source I've had about this information. This is in contravention of the Council's own code of practice and potential breach of the Nolan principles. This was raised by other Cabinet members at the time, but nothing was said by the officers. I urge the Scrutiny Committee, under their powers to seek independent advice, to see whether the advice that they've had is sound and whether they shouldn't be investigating this, what happened in this development.
Mr. Short, thank you very much for continuing to keep people's toes to the fire on this one. I think you're absolutely right that there are lessons to be learned from this, and in time we will get there. I'm going to reiterate the position that's been given to me by the monitoring officer, which is that the council still is within a contractual relationship with Alumno, and whilst this remains the case, it would not be appropriate for the panel to undertake any public scrutiny at this time, which could potentially prejudice the council's legal and or financial position. When the matter is determined one way or the other, the panel will be able to scrutinise the matter. So I hear your frustration though, and I'm frustrated as well. It is on our work programme, okay? I can physically see it there. So and hopefully, inshallah, I'm here for at least another year. So I will keep it on that work programme. I am aware though, and for your benefit, sir, that we have some new members to the panel. So I will, at some point shortly, have discussions with new members on the panel to make sure that they're appraised of what has happened, because we took a confidential briefing some weeks ago, 28th of January, from the monitoring officer on it, and it may well be that our newer members of the panel would like to be brought up to speed, and we could arrange potentially for another briefing, which would be in private session, but for the benefit of the room here. And then depending on what happens as a consequence of that, they may well push me in a direction that I maybe need to go in. But at the moment, I kind of feel like I've got to respect what the monitoring officer has said in regard to the legal and contractual position. But I'm happy to be challenged as always. Councillor Willits, Deputy Chairman, please can you help me out here?
Yes, Chairman, we'll be discussing this later on under the work programme, where there is a throwaway line item still to schedule, when possible, negotiations between the council and the alumno. I just wondered whether it would be useful to take that matter while we have the complainant before us, rather than you having to wait for the whole of the meeting to hear what we were intending to do on that, or listen to it on the radio back home.
Councillor Willits, so it's on the work programme because we know we need to look at it. We've been told by the monitoring officer that we can't look at it yet. What are you asking to happen right now for the benefit of Mr. Short here?
Just what we intend to do, because the work item now has morphed into negotiations between the council and alumno, which is an extremely wide area, and also takes us into the difficulties which we were told in confidence, confidentially at the briefing, and clearly we can't talk about it here. I mean, many of the worries that councillors have on this is not actually the negotiations between council and alumno, but just what happened in the start-up of this project. Because although we mustn't mention anything that was said at the confidential briefing, one thing which was said that we could almost in jest that we could report is that had the complexities of this project been known at the start, in all probability they would not have put their hand to the plough to go down that particular furrow. And it's that area which I have personally wanted to find out about as a member of the Scrutiny Panel. I don't really care what the quanta and the completion dates and the negotiations with, the current negotiations with alumno are. They must rightly, as was very persuasively told us by the monitoring officer, they must remain confidential until such time as all those agreements have been concluded, and only then can we really look at that issue. But the vexing question of why did the council not appreciate that this was an extremely complex project that could not be lightly addressed in the way it did, seems a matter that we could look at any time without going into the details of what are the current negotiations, what are the current quanta, and so on. It's the process leading into this where lessons need to be learned fairly quickly. You know, why did the council not recognise that this was an extremely complex transaction to go into? I mean, was any due diligence done or not any due diligence done? I don't know what the answer is, and I don't really want to hear it in public session at the moment. But you know, those are the things which we should be looking at to ensure that this doesn't happen again. You know, what is the due diligence process on land acquisition and land transactions to ensure that the transaction is capable of being concluded in a reasonable time without having difficulties going on for years and years? Because as Mr. Short said, it must be about 3 years ago when I was chairman of this panel when I gave that undertaking that we would look at this issue. And here we are some 3 years later, still not even knowing precisely what it is we are going to scrutinise at some indeterminate time. So perhaps we should look at the things we can look at.
Sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing that very firm steer from you, and I'm looking around the room now, and I want to see if the room agrees with that approach. So effectively a sanitised report coming here quite soon. Okay. Well, that's a firm recommendation from the Deputy Chairman there. I'm happy that we have consensus on that, and it may well be that there'll be further information that will still come out in the end when the arrangements with Alumno conclude. But at the moment, potentially there are some lessons to be learned, and we can get some information in this room sooner rather than later. I think that's what we're going to do. Mr. Short.
Yes, first of all, I'd say that I've been in negotiations and involved with contracts, including leases, which is effectively what the Alumno contract was, involving not just solicitors, but learned counsel. The contract only exists if there's an exchange of, that's the one that's legally enforceable, if there's any exchange of consideration, i.e. usually money. However, clauses that stay valid in a contract, even if it's no longer a contract, are the confidentiality clauses. And I can tell you that I've had advice over the years that confidentiality clauses are basically not legally enforceable unless it is proved that there is clear and immediate loss by the offended party for this. So confidentiality, in my view, sinks under the waves, and that some of the issues leading up to that agreement are very important. And I'm pleased that you're going to move at least part of the way down the road.
Just for the matter of record then, can we all express support if we would like to have a report or here to look at what we can? Thank you. Pending advice from monitoring officer. There we go then. Mr. Short, you've made a very, very big impact this evening. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you very much. I'll hang around a bit.
I think Five Guys is open this week if you're interested. Councillor Scorlis, do you need to come up to the hot seat at all, or are you just here to observe? Here to observe. Okay, good to see you. Thank you. Right then, let's make some progress. So, item 7, decisions taken under special urgency provisions. I am aware of none. Item 8, cabinet or portfolio holder decisions called in for review at this stage of the municipal year. I would be surprised, but I don't think we have any. Item 9, items requested by members of the panel and other members. New members of the panel, this is a very exciting part of the meeting. If you ever want to surprise the room, this is the moment to do it within, although I do suggest that generally building consensus around what you're going to do and having conversations in advance is always prudent, but it has happened. Right, now we're going to move on to item 10, which is looking at the year-end KPIs from the last municipal year. And we have a new portfolio holder here who technically wasn't responsible for that work last year. So it's going to be an interesting conversation, but I know that he is a councillor who takes his brief very seriously and is all over it, no doubt, for our questioning and scrutiny. You've obviously had a report written and we've seen the extensive supporting appendices on this, but we'll give you the floor for a little bit to tell us what's been going on, because I know that we've got some greens but we've got some reds.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm sure you've all read it as deeply as I have, and probably have as many questions as I had when I was looking through. So hopefully I can respond to most, if not all, of your queries and comments this evening. I know what you say about there being mostly greens, but a few ambers and one red item in there, if I recall correctly. So they're good KPIs in the main. Key performance indicators, I think we ought to just say, rather than KPI, for anybody who's watching the meeting. And these are the ways in which the council measures itself against the performance that's set out in the strategic plan. So there are a few that I picked up with officers, in particular around temporary accommodation and the proportion of households in temporary accommodation. I also picked up on the sickness absence across the council and wanted to know what they were about. I was also somewhat concerned about the increase in fly tipping over the last 12 months. So I've done some deep diving around that as well. I think for now that's all I would say in terms of introduction. I'll leave it to members to ask me, question me, make comments that I will take back.
Well, that is very, very kind, because you know as well as I do in a live media environment, the longer you talk, the less we are able to ask you questions, and you've given us a lot of latitude there. But that's all good. Okay then. Well, I will look to the panel, who no doubt have questions. I have some, but I'm not a greedy fisherman. I see Councillor Summers first of all with a hand, okay, great. Councillor Osborne and then Councillor Rowe. We'll do it in threes. Go for it.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Chris. Yeah, just looking back at the fly tipping. I know we haven't got the most up-to-date data, but having had obviously conversation with the previous portfolio holder, I know some of the thoughts around why this might have shown an uptick. But I was wondering what your thoughts were on it. Obviously, we've got I think does the booking system at the tip. Do you think that's having an effect? Obviously there's the price of the bulk collection items and things like that. Should we have more freighter days in sort of the more deprived areas and things? So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on those sorts of lines.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, and I was certainly concerned about some of those things as well. So I checked. I've got details ward by ward of reported fly tips over the last 12 months. And as you know from the figures, there's nearly a 50% increase in fly tipping across the city. I have specifically asked the question about whether or not the booking of the Shrub End centre is an issue, and I've been reliably informed that isn't. Much of the fly tipping, I'm reliably informed, is not what I think you and I and most of the public would consider to be fly tipping. It's poor or over use of our bins. So a lot of what's being termed as fly tipping is going just outside of our bins around the town. But I think that's a concern. What I did get back from my communication with officers earlier is that the compactor bins don't seem to have that issue. And even though there were some concerns about the compactor bin in the high street not necessarily fitting in with the city view, I am informed that there is a replacement on order, slightly smaller, but that will fit in with the street scene better than the current one, so that one will be moved elsewhere. But I know from my own ward in Beerchurch that the compactor bin has been very useful and very well received. So the three wards that had the highest amount of fly tipping around the city were Grinstead, Just, Castle followed shortly behind, and Beerchurch being next. So I've asked about those. I was told that there were no particular issues with any of the rural parishes. No parish council that was concerned about major ongoing fly tipping. But if anyone is aware of that, then please report them to me. I asked about commercial fly tipping. You know, how much of it were we aware of being large-scale fly tipping, and was informed that there have been one or two episodes of that, but in the main there aren't any to be really concerned about, other than one which is being pursued and seems to be a large-scale problem rather than just related to or restricted to the city of Colchester.
Thank you for that. So, I mean, I've seen the digital communications around fly tipping from CCC comms, and I've also seen the physical signage in places to remind people that they're potentially being filmed, which is good proactivity, and probably we haven't seen necessarily the fruits of that quite yet. So I cautiously hat tip for that action. But before we move on to Councillor Osborne, does anyone else wish to talk about fly tipping? Councillor Willits.
Yeah, Chairman, it's extremely difficult to see how this can be controlled, and I have a great sympathy with the portfolio holder in that there don't seem to be any easy ways of stopping it. Even fixed penalty notices don't seem to be all that good a deterrent, and I think it's really down to education. So interesting to hear what can be done on the education side to try and get this KPI back under control. Portfolio holder mentioned the rural issues. Now, I'm aware of a rural issue in one of the villages that I represent. The parish council employ a guy to go round and collect litter. He also collects any small amounts of fly tipping that occur in the village, and traditionally stacked what he collected up against the council waste bins for collection by the council. The council then started to account for that as fly tipping, which distorted the figures somewhat. The parish council asked how could it avoid this being fly tipping, and were told that they could pay the city council to take it away, and then it wouldn't go onto the fly tipping statistics. So we're in the position where if one side of the A12 you do that in Stanway, the council come along and clear it away and just say tut tut. If on the other side, 50 yards across the bridge, if it's done, the parish council, which means the people who live there, have to pay an extra charge to the city council to have exactly the same type of stuff taken away, which sort of indicates to me that there isn't really a consistent policy to deal with all areas fairly. And it's a shame that the statistics are getting warped because the city council wants to make a quick buck out of the parish councils to do things which it does for free in the urban areas, but wants to charge the parish councils for doing it. And I think, ask the portfolio holder whether it would be better if there was some standardised way for dealing with fly tipping between the parish councils and the city council, and to include the parish council's collection of fly tipping within the city council statistics, so that we get an overall figure rather than just looking effectively at what the city council is doing in the urban area in the main.
Councillor Pearson, can you take this matter away? Because the other thing that Councillor Willetts didn't mention is, well, he did subtly, is of course the parishes are paying for someone to pick up this litter, and they're therefore effectively subsidising the city council from having to go out there and do that. So that's there's got to be a bit of give and take here. Can we look into this, and can you speak to the relevant portfolio holder to bottom this one out?
I would just ask Dennis, could you send me a brief email with details of the parish council and what's happening, and I will take it up with cabinet colleagues. So I'm sure there must be a way forward. I know that you will all have seen on social media that, along with my two Beer Church colleagues, we regularly do litter picks, and we have a relationship with the zone wardens. We let them know where we are leaving the litter pick debris all tied up and sacked up to be collected. So I'm sure we can find some way around that.
Okay, before I move on to Councillor Rippingale on fly tipping, Councillor Willetts, do you wish to speak any more about fly tipping? Great, okay. Councillor Rippingale.
Sorry, I've been busily typing. I think what's really interesting about those areas identified that having the higher levels is that they're generally areas that have higher rental levels and lower access to car ownership, which makes it very, very difficult for those people to get to Shrub End. So I suppose, is there a targeted service or action that we could take to look to support those households who have not got access to a car? And I know that we're going to say we've got the collection service that's on the website. I've actually had several constituents say that is very difficult to navigate, that collection service. And having tried to use it myself, and one would hope that as an ex-e-commerce manager I would be able to work a website, I also had found that really, very difficult to get what I wanted collected, because we're very specific about what items it is. Whereas if you go to a general waste person, they'll go, yeah, that's like £100 for all of that stuff, and you don't have to detail particularly what it is. So I think we're not helping ourselves by, one, making it really difficult to book a collection on our website, and there's quite a lag in terms of the collection time. I think it's at least a week. So someone's going to have something sitting there for at least a week. So I don't think we particularly help ourselves, where we've got freighter days, which is great, but they're only twice a year in those areas, and we're not considering how people are going to get quite large chunky items to Shrub End, and the cost of that, and the fact that the service, I don't think it's excessively expensive if you compare it to private carriers, but that it's quite a complex service to navigate. So that might also be why people are just putting stuff on the side of the road, because they can't work it out. They want to do the best, but they can't. I think also, I'm really fortunate in Newtown that we've got a really good warden, and he's really proactive, and he does a lot of education with the community. What I would like to see, or would like to understand, is there a system of best practice learning among the wardens who have done that, had really good successes engaging with the community around fly tipping? Because I know Scotty's been involved with the latest campaign, and I'd like to see how that campaign has worked, actually, as figures, because having that more visible presence with the signs and the tape, and how effective has that been? Because I know it's been effective in other areas where they've they've done it and we've learnt from. But also I'd like to understand that, is there a system of best practice from wardens who have been really successful? Because I know the wardens in Grinstead were a real asset and part of the community, so it would be good to ensure that that learning is being passed. Because we literally had 2 months where we had a different warden and the deterioration was significant. So much so that I asked for Scotty to come back. So I think there's a bigger issue here, is that it's not generally people wanting to fly tip. I think we don't make it easy for them not to. Do you see what I mean?
To help Councillor Pearson out, are you able to share your first-hand experience of navigating that website and your other 2 points in an email so that he can go away? Because some of it was quite granular, but it's good stuff. Still on fly tipping, Councillor McCarthy.
It is. Councillor Osborne, is yours not on fly tipping? So I'm happy to give way, but it's not. Okay, perfect. I'll crack on. It's a very quick one. So certainly in Shrub End, Claire will back me up on this, but we see areas where there's management companies or housing associations, fly tipping is particularly bad. Often it can be just off where they are responsible for, so it almost becomes like a no man's land, and the council will step in and pick up that fly tipping. Does that then go on to our figures when it comes to fly tipping numbers? And equally, how much pressure can we put on housing associations and management companies to do more? Because there is an issue there, I feel. Thank you.
This might be a question for Councillor Smith of old, but you take it, Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, I mean, with regard to both of those comments, I think I will pass on your concerns to the portfolio holder for waste and environment, because ultimately much of that is his responsibility. Interestingly enough, IT and the website fall within my remit, so I'm more than happy to have Councillor Rippingdale show me what the issue is, so that I can look at that, because I am aware that there are some elements of our website that need to be more user-friendly, let's suggest. So I'm happy to take those away. One thing I would say about Grinstead is, from my conversations with our team, there is an issue with students at the end of their let that leads to increased fly tipping, because suddenly they've got furniture and other materials that they don't want to take away with them, and they are left. So that is a particular issue at a particular time of the year, I'm informed.
Okay, thank you for being patient, Councillor Osborne. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted
Still on
to
fly
echo,
tipping.
I just wanted to echo Councillor Rippingdale's love for Scotty.
Oh yeah,
he is gold standard. So yeah, any teaching that he can give to other wardens, I mean, he's brilliant. So I just wanted to get that one in.
Lovely. Okay, Councillor Osborne.
Forgive me for my simple question, but in regards to the key performance indicators, how is this information gathered and how accurate is this information?
Sorry, in relation to all of the indicators, or is there one in particular on whole? Okay, so there are lots of different mechanisms. Some of the services will have computer systems that keep the, I mean, most of it will be system driven. So it will be input, and then, so each fly tip, there'll be a recording of the fly tip that will go into a system, and the system will then capture that information, which is how, as Councillor Pearson said, it can then be broken down by ward. So some of them are that way. If you look at all the Colchester Borough homes, there's a fairly intelligent computer system that they work on. So I would say most of it's, in fact, nearly all of it nowadays is system driven. There's not a lot of spreadsheets in play, I'm glad to say.
Great. Okay, I saw Councillor Rowe.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, congratulations, Councillor Pearson, on your new appointment and your new role. Look forward to this going forward. Just like to say something about temporary accommodation. I think you picked up on it already, and obviously I'm sort of aware that you're aware of it and the administration's aware of it. House temporary accommodation increased from 314 to 443 in 12 months. I think that's quite a large increase, which I think we should probably be you know, aware of and flagging as an issue. I think it brings me back to my thing that I say pretty much every year around modular housing, and I wonder if the council would maybe revisit if they could build a cheap modular housing to help reduce this number going forward. I know I always get a pushback on that, but I still think it's something that we should investigate. Bit of feedback there. Is that better? Okay, yeah, that sounds better. Okay, so it's probably that one then. All right, fair enough. Right, well, there we go. Right, we're good now. Okay, excellent. So just looking at this from a sort of statistical perspective, what's the breakdown? I couldn't really see the breakdown of where this additional numbers are coming from. So is it people who are being evicted? Is it people sort of suffering domestic abuse? Is it asylum? Is it anything else? I mean, what are the reasons? I couldn't see that in the statistical breakdown. I think it would be interesting for us to understand what would happen. And sort of break it down further, I know that this often gets brought up, but they're linked to Colchester. I mean, I know when I apply for a loan, for example, I have to show that my residence for 5 years to explain where I've been. I mean, what's the process from this perspective? How far do we go back? How far do we have to prove that there's a local connection to Colchester? What's that? That would be interesting to see, you know, because I'm assuming that everyone technically has a connection to Colchester, but it would be interesting to see how far back that connection to Colchester goes. It could be far, it might not be. And bearing the cost of this, what's the breakdown of the local cost versus the national cost as well? I think they're sort of my main points at this point in time. So yeah, thanks.
Yes, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Pearson.
Thanks, Thomas, for your best wishes. With regard to the breakdown of where the individuals who are in temporary accommodation comes from, I can't say that I have that information, but I'll take that away. Obviously, the portfolio holder for housing will have a better understanding of that than I do. But it's certainly something that we need to be looking at. The information that I've ascertained is that there are issues around the amount in which individuals who find themselves in need get as local housing allowance. And that local housing allowance, if I just give you a couple of figures. For a one-bedroom home, local housing allowance is £623. The average local rent at the moment in Colchester is £750. So that's a deficit that individuals have to find. When you're talking about a three-bedroom home, that increases significantly. So local housing allowance is £792.82p, and the average local private rent is £1,250 per calendar month. So there's a significant gap there, which I think is contributing to the number of individuals who are finding themselves homeless. There are other issues that are being worked on. I'm told that over the last year, 1,573 homeless applications were considered, and that there are also fewer affordable homes to rent in the private sector. That's having an issue. The student accommodation or need for student accommodation also has an impact on the private rental sector in Colchester, which means that we have a higher proportion of individuals in temporary accommodation than any other council in the east of England, if you look at one of the figures in the documents in front of you. So I think those are things that we all need to be concerned about, and finding ways to deliver affordable, not only affordable housing, but also social housing is something that we need to be looking at. And I know that Scrutiny considered the Mill Road site recently. Hopefully that comes on stream before not too long and has some impact in terms of reducing the homelessness around the city.
I think we'll probably
I'll
agree to disagree on the benefits of that, but there we go.
I'll take your other queries back to the housing portfolio.
Yeah, if you could do that, I'd appreciate. I mean, I can put them in writing for you, and I can send them across. And if you can get the stats, that would be really helpful.
That would be helpful.
And we can, thank you very much.
Okay,
Just one other thing that I forgot to mention when it, with regard to fly tipping, is that we were all sent, councillors were all sent a pro forma for reporting fly tipping incidents, and the team say that if you use those, if we use those as councillors, it makes it much easier for them to deal with them more efficiently, and that they are working on doing something similar for the members of the public and for parish councils so that they can more efficiently report fly tipping incidents.
thank you for that one. Okay, we're still on people in temporary housing situations, 443 households in the last municipal year. I've got Councillor Rippingale, Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Willits.
I suppose I'm a bit fortunate in having lived the experience the last year as shadow portfolio holder for housing. In terms of modular housing, there was a huge piece of work done on that, and there was a £500 per square metre difference in terms of cost versus traditional build versus modular, even if you factored in the time saving.
If you can send me the details, I'd be very happy, because
Yeah.
I've asked the portfolio holder multiple.
Yeah.
I know, but I can probably go through it rather than doubling up.
Yeah.
Because I've asked, and I have a one-page document which effectively says this is the cost and this is the cost for this one. And I have responded back and said I don't think that was what we're looking for. I was looking for a bit more detail, and I got shut down and said, well, we don't need to talk about that anymore.
Well,
So if you've got some extra information, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, like I said, I sat in many meetings about it, so definitely, and visited a site up in Romford, so and was very impressed. There is a cost to the council that was significant to go down that route. Asylum isn't managed by CBH, it's managed by Clear Springs, so they're not included in our temporary accommodation figures.
Okay, right.
3 years for the local connection if they don't live here or have relatives here.
3 years.
Yeah. In terms of beyond the box, I think, that's shown what thinking about things differently can do. It allows us to claim more of the housing benefit, which is where we've made such a massive saving in terms of versus a hotel room, you can only claim single person occupancy. So the fact that it's a different type of rent means that you can claim more of that housing benefit, which means that we're not having to fork out. So going forward, the government's been very impressed of what we've done to try and solve that issue. So I think that's something that we should continue to do, is look at different ways. No one wants anyone in a hotel room. That's not a way to live a life, is it? So I suppose what I would say is, do we actually understand the challenges that CBH staff members are facing accessing the private rental market? Because I don't think we do as councillors. What became very apparent recently is that credit referencing for those who have been economically abused or are from a migrant background, they don't have good credit ratings a lot of the time, and that's difficult for the staff because they're saying we're encouraging them to go to the private sector, saying we haven't got enough social housing, we're not going to be able to house you, but actually the frustration in that for the staff and the tenant is high. And I think as a council, in supporting the staff there, that's something we need to challenge with government or with letting agencies, or what work we need to do as a council with private landlords to make those tenants more attractive. Do you see what I mean? Like, we've got the Home Step scheme, which is an amazing scheme, which sort of guarantees, but that's still not attractive enough. So I think, from my perspective, it would be, what are we doing to support the staff for a very difficult time, when we know there's all these underlying issues that are preventing people who need to access social housing and who are in temporary accommodation accessing those private rents. And it would also really, really be good to know what work is being done to canvass government on the HRA settlement, going back to the 2012 settlement, so that we can reset the balance. Because obviously COVID, inflation, that really makes it very tricky for us to build social housing. So in terms of us scrutinising that temporary accommodation, it's influenced by so many outside factors. It's always going to be really difficult for our staff to house people unless we as an organisation are really pushing for those changes to allow us to build more council houses or to allow those people to access the private rental sector. So I think from our perspective, we should be scrutinising what are the challenges that our staff members are facing to house these people, rather than looking at the temporary accommodation, because we've put cost savings in by doing something different. So, sorry, that was a bit of a lecture.
It's very insightful. Councillor Rowe, and then I'm going to go to Councillor McCarthy and then Councillor Willis.
Can I just ask a very quick question around the fact that you mentioned housing migrants? And my point, I think, was around asylum. Can you just state from a housing perspective what the difference is, and from what I said from asylum to what you're pointing out around migrants being housed? Thank you.
So that's more around like legal migration. So what you'll find is that families, they don't come into social housing. If you look at the difference in ethnic backgrounds, actually the ethnic minorities access social housing a lot less than white nationals.
But if they're coming through legal migration, surely they'd have a job here, and you would expect them not to use social housing.
No, that's what I'm saying is
social housing. So we are saying that there are migrants that come in that are using social housing. Is that what we're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that it's more difficult for migrants to access the private sector, so that they could end up homeless, because they don't have the guarantor value or the credit to be able to rent in the private sector.
So that doesn't get factored. So when we're bringing them in through a legal migrant process, that doesn't get factored in. So they can come in as a legal migrant, but they may not have the credit rating, or they may not have the capital to put up a deposit, so that they then fall on and become a statistic in the social housing. Is that what we're saying?
It could be.
Okay.
I mean,
well, that's what I was trying to get at. So what I was trying to say was, if that's a factor, I think it would be interesting for us to know what those statistics are, because I think a lot of this is probably, don't get me wrong, sounds like you know your shadow briefing really, really well, much better than I do, because I haven't been part of this. But I'm simply saying that it would be interesting to see what those stats are. So I feel like if we could see that, maybe we could have a useful conversation and learn something from it. So
Councillor Rowe, I was going to just jump in, and because it just hit me in the head that obviously we've had. You okay, chaps? I'll come to you second. Just give me. I'm just adding a bit of flavour and colour to this one, because obviously we know, don't we, through our friends in the garrison, that we welcomed into Colchester open-heartedly people from Afghanistan who'd been involved in operations out there, the interpreters, for example. We also know, don't we, that many people in Colchester signed up to the Homes for Ukrainians scheme. And so it is an interesting concept that whilst in theory folks come here, we welcome them in and they're looked after, but then things do go wrong. Relationship breakdowns, whatever, things can go wrong. And So I think it's a legitimate point that Councillor Rowe is trying to get to around understanding some of the makeup of that list, because if we as a city are, for example, signing up to being a city of sanctuary, which we've all, I believe, agreed to, like at least the last vote in the chamber was that we agreed to do that. If we are stating that we are a city of sanctuary, and by virtue we're opening our hearts to people to come here, if that is actually having an impact on the temporary housing list, we need to at least be alive to it. I'm not offering a view on whether it's right or wrong, I'm just saying we need to be alive to it. Councillor Pearson, and then Councillor McCarthy, and then Councillor Willetts.
Yeah, just very quickly, because obviously as Chair of Governance and Audit over the last 3 years, I've been involved in a lot of scrutinising and auditing of CBH, and I know that they will come to Scrutiny Panel. So I think these are probably things that you want to tease out when you scrutinise CBH. I'd just add that coming back to legal migrants, the difficulty with the private sector is they often want credit ratings, and somebody who's only been in the country for a short period of time will have a very limited credit rating.
Councillor McCarthy, then Councillor Willetts.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, I don't actually want to come in on this one, but can you bring me back for sickness, please? I'm happy to give way.
Okay, Councillor Willetts.
Yeah, Chairman, on the matter of households in temporary accommodation, my point is in regard to the KPI settings, because we're looking at what happened in 2024-5 and trying to decide whether 5.27 per 1,000 households is unreasonable because it's above the target of 4, or whether there are reasonable explanations given. And I just have a worry on this one that I don't see the objective methods by means of which the target of 4 was set. And we read in the dialogue that the number's gone up from 314 to 443, which takes us over the top of that. But we don't know how flaky that was in the first place. And what seems to be missing is a longer term profile of what we anticipate the number of households in temporary accommodation is likely to be. And clearly it has to be a range, because we haven't got a magical crystal ball, but we can take a sensible view. And one does hear differing opinions. There's one opinion which says, let's house the 443 and we've solved the problem, there'll be no one else, job done, great. There's another opinion which says that you've got 443, and if you house them all, another 443 will turn up in the next year to 18 months. And as a council, we don't seem to have a view on what the future number of households in temporary accommodation is going to be. Now, some may say that it is just too difficult to have a view. And my response to that is, if it's too difficult to have a view, you can't really have a KPI for something you just don't understand and are effectively a random number of people turning up each year, which we need to house. And therefore, you've got a random factor in the finances of the council, because we don't know how much we're going to have to fork out. I would hope we can ask Cabinet if they can come forward with or the portfolio holder, perhaps not Cabinet, come forward with sort of a draft of a future view on what we're likely to have to provide in terms of households or temporary accommodation for households in, say, the next 5 years. Now, I know it's a really difficult one because the probability of getting it right is pretty slim, but at least it could be a useful planning guide in setting future KPIs, which are not totally ridiculous because the numbers are random.
Councillor Pearce.
Just come back on that very quickly. I take your point about the need to forward plan as much as is possible within the limits of projecting. One of the things that did happen early in the last year was the removal of the stopping of evictions, which was introduced during COVID. and that has raised. If you look at the figures over the last quarter, and just over the last quarter, they have sort of flatlined, but they are still higher than I think any of us around the table would want to see. So certainly doing something about it is or should be a cabinet priority.
Councillor Rippingale.
I'd actually like to come in with a recommendation. What I've noticed in some of the work that I do with residents is that they come to CBH too late. So the aim should be that if they're in private rented accommodation now, we'd prefer to keep them there. If they're in arrears, there's stuff that the council can do to help. So part of me feels like there needs to be some form of communication to the population of Colchester that if you are in trouble and you are in private rented accommodation, please come to the council. Because if we can keep more people in their private tenancies, you may actually see less people being evicted and less going into temporary accommodation because they're able to sustain those tenancies. It could be that they've lost their job, they've had a minor blip, a household expense, and I think actually they come to the council too late. So they come when they've got a Section 21 or they've come when they've got a possession order, and then it's too late because that relationship between the landlord and the tenant has broken down. So my recommendation to the portfolio holder or cabinet would be that actually there needs to be some comms around this.
I mean, that sounds like a very logical recommendation. I'm happy to support you on that one. If we want to note that down now, we can get cabinet to get that word. It seems, I mean, it's a proactive piece of comms, isn't it? And it's asking in-house comms how we can do this. It might initially be, it's just a digital approach. It might be that it's a leaflet. I don't know. I'm not in that world anymore. But I think it's a very firm recommendation to cabinet. I'd like to take that if we're minded so. I think it's unanimous. All hands? Well done. Great stuff. I feel like I'm curating an auction here.
Can we wind in the need for the profile of future temporary housing to make the KPI sensible? Can we wind that into the same? Or does that need to be a separate recommendation?
Yeah, okay, let's do it separately. Could you just help me out here, Dennis? Because my brain is not as good as yours, and I'm just struggling a little bit.
No,
I understand the sentiment and thrust of where you're coming from, but I'm just trying to think about what the portfolio holder is going to say when they see these words. How can we help them out to maximum effect, please?
Well, we want to see a profile of what the cabinet believes will be the future demand for temporary accommodation. Which can then become the basis of a sensible KPI. So,
okay, some strong future gazing. All right, Clark is diligently writing this down. Do we all support this? I do.
Maybe a easier way of putting it is forward forecasting. Sorry, it's from the world of merchandising. It used to forecast demand.
Yeah. But Councillor Liz, does this work for you?
no, I'm quite happy to substitute better words for profile. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Corey, I've only just noticed your hand up. It is very small on the screen. I know it's quite big in real life. Councillor Corey, we're going to give you the floor. And I imagine you wish to speak on this particular item. So we're having a conversation around semantics of the word forecast, but we got there. We're good. Councillor Corey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've been listening to every word, and I think the principle of what Dennis is getting at is really useful, actually, because there isn't a point in necessarily having just a figure and a KPI on temporary accommodation on its own, because it links to the amount of council housing we can provide and the fluctuations in that, and it links to the amount of people that are coming. So Dennis is absolutely right to look into that. I think it definitely is about saying to Cabinet, let's review what is the point of this KPI and how can we make it more meaningful, and how can we set ourselves a target to actually ensure we reduce it, but in a way that we are doing it in a constructive way, which is mainly by delivering more available council stock. But I think it definitely needs to look into making it a bit more, I think, real in terms of an achievable aim for us. So that will be to provide more council accommodation and to reduce the need for temporary accommodation. Because also, as resources portfolio holder, I can tell you how costly that is. And I know that Councillor Pearson explained earlier that the misalignment in the funding we get from government for bigger families using more than one room will be a big loss to us and our finances. So it also links to that as well, aiming to reduce that burden of temporary accommodation because it's a really high financial burden, and instead to do a more proactive piece of work, providing housing, and also, as Kaylee has said, avoiding evictions in the first place and keeping them in safe accommodation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gorey. Councillor Rippingell.
I'm sorry, I'm being really annoying tonight. It's first night here. I think it would also be really good for us to look at our reliance on private temporary accommodation in terms of places like Sea Trade House that are more expensive, and we do see issues there. I suppose for me, if we can look to expand our use of the student sector, that would be preferable, but it would be good for us to see the differences in costs, I think, as a panel, between those private TAs, because also we have a lot less control of those about out of borough placements.
I can't remember if Councillor Smith, because we spoke about this before, because we was very supportive of the
Beyond the Box scheme.
using the student accommodation for to house the temporary individuals. I can't remember if he said if the commercial information was something that we had to keep commercial because I'm sure there was something around that point, because I'm sure we asked that previously, and there was some issue around the fact that we weren't allowed to know what the cost was, or at least publicly we weren't allowed to know what the cost was. But I do agree. I think it's anything where we can make transparency around the cost, I think is very useful.
Councillor Rippingell, I think it's great that you've joined us, and when we get to scrutinise the portfolio holder, that'll be a very, very fruitful evening, no doubt. And these are big issues, and they're not going away. So, good stuff. Okay, let's make some progress.
Chair, can I just have a go at adding some additional recommendations?
Before that.
Sorry.
Just to go back to Councillor Willits with the amended wording, say forward forecast, can I just get a show of hands?
Yes, so are we all in agreement that we would like Cabinet to create forward forecasting of this information to help with the KPI, make it more real? I don't know what Councillor Corey said, make it real? I don't know. Realistic, there we go, good. All happy? Yeah. All happy, great, unanimous, great stuff. Okay, Councillor Rowe, you wish to add some more fun to the mix?
What I was trying to say was, I feel like some of the stuff that we've been speaking about here probably needs to be added to the KPIs in addition to the forward forecasting, which I completely agree with. So, I think, bear with me on this, but the Cabinet commissions a full breakdown and review of the increase in the housing, right, from temporary accommodation from 314 to 443. And now whether we actually want that word or not is fine, right? The primary cause of the homelessness, i.e. eviction, domestic abuse, asylum, dispersal, cost of living, migration, for example, as was already pointed out. The proportion of individuals with a confirmed local connection to Colchester, because obviously we've already spoken about the fact that some of the migrants might not have a confirmed 3-year, but might be here and then in social housing. So we should know what the numbers are of which people have a confirmed connection and which ones don't. I think Councillor Pearson made a point around breakdown of the financial responsibility between Colchester City and the national government, and who has responsibility for what areas, what's the breakdown and what's the gap between what we're spending and what the government is asking us to spend. and that forecasting be introduced, which we've already sort of discussed. So
Okay, so
I think there's a few things there, but I think that those are all important to be part of the KPIs going forward for us to make informed decisions and understand how this is, because we can only understand it in full if we understand the underlying data. So we need to know where these individuals are arising from, so that we can best help them.
yeah. Okay, Mrs. Bredman.
It sounds to me like that some of that is just extra information you want.
Yeah.
So rather than a recommendation, I don't think there'll be a problem with us. I mean, often with the KPIs, you ask for more information and we provide it for you. If you then want more information, or that information leads to you wanting to scrutinise it. So I think the first step maybe is us just get it, we've captured that, get you that information if we can. And
Okay, so if
Yeah,
we go back
does
to it,
that
and
make
what I'll
sense?
send it, I'll
Yeah.
send it across to Councillor Pearson, and I'll request the information. All right, fair enough, that's fine.
I really like that,
Thank
because
you very
actually
much.
I think last year the portfolio holder was very good at explaining making it real for us to understand what it might be like if you are a single parent trying to cook for a child or more in a room that doesn't have anything more than a kettle. So I would like to understand beyond just 443 what those people are actually having to deal with, because we have a platform here and we can say things that make a difference and shape policy in the long run. For example, school catchments, because of course you can drive all over Colchester to any school you like. In theory, in the old days, you used to have to go to your local school that would be within walking distance. And so decisions like that have an impact when suddenly someone is thrust out of their home environment and put into temporary accommodation, which they have no choice in. And that puts challenges on things. So I'm just get that off my chest. Councillor Rippingale.
Can I recommend that when the portfolio holder does come in front of us, that perhaps this panel visits Beyond the Box, if they haven't done already, and meet some of those individuals, because I have, and their stories are quite compelling, and the difference that's made. But I think it's important that those tenants' voices are heard in this scrutiny.
I think that sounds a great idea. Maybe even case studies could come here, so we can. I just think we've got to think about more than just a number. These are people with real lives and real life challenges, and we all know how difficult it can be at times in parts of Colchester, etc. Okay, we're going to make progress because there is a caffeine fix coming. Here, I saw Councillor McCarthy earlier. You wanted to talk about the sickness KPIs. Is this still the case?
I did, it is.
Great. Okay, then you have the floor.
Thank you. It seems that whenever I sub on this panel, it is the KPIs that we're going through, and it's really good to see that there's a separation between corporate and waste, which we asked for several years ago, I think Dennis and I. I didn't see it last year. I don't know if it was separated last year, but what I want to basically say is the argument always was that we were always above target because of waste. Well, that's clearly not the case, because there's issues in corporate as well, and we're above the target there. So I think it was more just a comment, but there's also the point, I don't know if this is for you, Lucy, or for you, Chris. Are we ever likely to see the targets settle? Every year we're going to have to slightly increase them? Because I think when I joined the council in 2019, it was 8% for the two. We're now at 15.5 for waste and 9.84 for corporate alone. So I think, is it where is the cut-off point here? Where does it become unsustainable? I think that's what I'm trying to say, is it just grows every year and it doesn't look like it's ever going to settle.
I mean, when we're talking about recycling, I would hope it's continuing to go up.
We're talking about sickness.
Are you talking about sickness?
Sickness, yeah.
Sickness, yeah.
So recycling, yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, the sickness levels, I'm afraid, sorry.
All right, so the sickness absence, yes, I looked at those figures and I was somewhat anxious when I looked at those. And utilising my previous experience in employment where I had some responsibility for overseeing sickness absence and doing reviews, and also being a union rep on the other side. I'm fully au fait with all the things that go into sickness absence. And I was concerned, so I asked some questions about what's happening. And what are the driving factors behind that sickness absence. So there is an issue with musculoskeletal issues for our, in particular for our waste operatives, which hopefully when the transformation for waste collection comes to pass will ease. But that is an issue. It's also an issue, believe it or not, for our parking attendants, because they're doing a lot of walking around all day. So there are some issues there. The next big issue is stress-related illness. So I asked what we're doing about those. There are regular return to work interviews, and I'm sure Lucy will correct me if I get any of this wrong, with individuals who are off. There are funded physiotherapy sessions for individuals with musculoskeletal issues, and if they're not supported by GP or occupational health, then other services can be accessed via HR. There is an issue, however, with a ever-aging workforce when it comes to musculoskeletal issues. So we need to bear that in mind, because obviously, as those of us who get older find, some of our bits do start to break down. With regard to stress, again, there are, return to work interviews and monitoring. There is free gym membership or swim membership for staff, wellbeing champions in each service, and a wellbeing programme with wellbeing days held at both Shrub End and Rowan House, and other things I won't go into. There's a lot more detail in here, but if you want to know, I'm happy to share with you.
I'm going to bring in Mrs. Bredman. I'm then going to have Councillor Willits, and I just wanted to add something else, which is probably Mrs. Bredman can answer because she'll know, because she gets about more than I do across the council estate. But I know that Colchester Events Company are doing a fantastic job with filling lots of poster displays all over this building with all our upcoming events, etc. But as someone that only really spends much of my time in this building, in this role, I'm not sure I've bumped into posters advertising mental health first aiders, for example, which I know that probably is happening elsewhere. But I think that that's a good thing that we're able to now talk about that, because we weren't perhaps doing that 30 years ago. You'd go to any workplace and you'd get the standard health and safety poster. Now you get an explicit, if you need to talk to someone, these people are mental health first aid trained, which is great. I just wondered if that is happening, because I don't think I've seen it in here. Sorry to add something else to it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I haven't got a huge amount to add. I think Councillor Pearson covered it really well. What I would say is, yes, I mean, those kind of posters would be more on the internal side of things where staff are working. What I would say, from my perspective as a manager of many years, I think our processes here are tight, really tight. So managers are on sickness. We know what an issue sickness is for individuals and for teams and for productivity. So, it's drummed into managers that we have a really tight process. There's a lot of support, huge amount of support for individuals, as Councillor Pearson has gone through. I think our biggest problem at the moment, and we were just looking at statistics the other day in senior board, it is the long-term sickness. That's a really hard nut to crack. People's illnesses and their longer-term challenges are getting more complex. We have a number of staff really sad at the moment that have cancer. And again, because of the ageing workforce, it isn't just our frontline services now. As you say, as you get older, you get all sorts of, sadly, serious illnesses and longer term illnesses. We are seeing some long COVID, and obviously nowadays, I think when you get people with underlying symptoms, they then get flu or something on top of that. What would have maybe been a short-term illness becomes a longer-term illness where they're off for more weeks. Having said that, our flexibility of our working and the ability for staff to work from home when they're not 100%, not come in and, spread germs to that I think our sickness would be much higher if it wasn't for some of those things. And if you look at the benchmarking information, you know, we're not a front runner, and we're not, but I would suggest we're somewhere in the middle, which is good. I would suggest some of those councils which are really low probably have outsourced frontline services, I would imagine, because the frontline is still an issue. But I also would say that actually there is what I'm sensing is, and we've talked about this at Scrutiny before, I think last time the performance report was here, there's a lot of pressure on staff at the moment. You know, we have had a long time of cuts and savings and people doing big jobs and a lot of expectation, and again that's where I think sometimes the stress comes in. But actually, again, the wraparound support that we try to put around the staff in the organisation is, are we doing everything we can do? I'm sure there's always more, and we're always looking to learn. But I would say it's tighter here than in many organisations that I've worked in before.
Thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Pearson quickly, and then we're going to have Councillor Willits and Councillor Somers.
Yeah, just very quickly to come back. So, I mean, I asked for a breakdown of long-term versus short-term sickness because I was concerned about that, and I've always been concerned about that as well. I do have a detailed breakdown of the categories of those illnesses, which I don't think is appropriate to share in this forum, but if you wanted them, I'm happy to share them with you on a confidential basis. But as Bredman's already pointed out, the service from my early look-see appears to be doing everything that it should be doing, both to manage sickness absence, but also to support individuals back into the workplace.
Okay, Councillor Willits.
As Chairman, Councillor McCarthy's campaign to have the sickness for waste and recycling separated from corporate was going to be a huge achievement, because it would have meant that we'd actually see where the problem was, the people who are lifting the bins all day, and we'd see that in the corporate area where people just lift a pen, there really is no muscular skeleton problems. So I was very intrigued to see this and to hear the explanation, because people who've got problems with their back, and I certainly have that, we're told that what we should do is get up more, don't sit around, get up, potter around, take a job such as a parking warden so that you can amble around the town and hand out a few parking notices, and effectively, you know, don't sit around, actually be busy, but not in a way that overtaxes the body. So I'm still intrigued how it is that we're getting long-term sickness due to muscular problems in the corporate area. I just don't follow that the class of employee pointed to should be leading to a significant rise in long-term sickness due to those reasons.
Mrs. Bredman's going to help us out on this one, I think.
So I'll go away and check, but my assumption will be that waste's been separated, but everything else is in corporate. So that means all our other frontline services as well. So parking, for example, would be in there, and we have other frontline services. It's not just waste services, so sport and leisure would be in there, museums would be in there, customer would be in there. It's not just the back office.
Just very quickly as well, from my experience of working in an office environment, albeit a quite active office environment, there are individuals who suffer from spending, you know, hour after hour sat at a desk, improperly in most cases, but sat at a desk over a VDU all day. And that leads to its own issues, including musculoskeletal.
Good observations. Okay, right. Have we done sickness? No, my apologies. Councillor Somers.
Yeah, just so echoing the at a desk, yeah, you can still, you know, with the typing you get RSI in your wrists and shoulder problems if you're not sat properly. My home office setup is my dining room table, so that's not great. So if I don't get my cushions right, I can get a bit of back issues there. But my main issue is what we do about recognising stress and how early we look at that. Do we have like, I mean, I'm going back a few years, but Mark, I mean, we used to have an online sort of test you could do. If you were feeling stressed, you could go in there, and if you hit too many triggers, then it was a report up to your manager to say you really need to talk to this person. I wondered, do we have anything like that, or is there any other methods we have or managers are trained in to recognise particularly the early signs of stress? Because obviously people bottle things up. Nobody likes to complain too well. A lot of people don't like to complain too much, you know, and then all of a sudden, bam, it explodes. So it's you know, it's about prevention and getting it in early. Just wonder what sort of methods we have there.
So I would say there's a few things, some that have already been mentioned around the wellbeing champions. They're officers at all levels in the organisation, most of which that are not at a management level. So actually that's really nice for people to go and talk to staff that aren't necessarily managers if they want to talk about what they can be worried about, disclosing those kind of feelings. So that is one of them. We do staff surveys. We always ask about stress levels in staff surveys. The back to work interview is really important because actually that's somewhere where you can pick up, somebody might have said they were off with sickness, but actually if a good interview might pick up other problems. The other thing that more and more is happening in the organisation, most of our managers are now being trained as coaches as well, and that is about those slightly different techniques and talking to staff and trying to spot the signs and symptoms. But what I would say is that the one downside of the flexible working is you don't see people as often. So actually picking up on some of those things is more difficult. And I think the point you make about the working setup, again, we're trying really hard to make sure that people have proper workstations at home, because we're really conscious of people sitting for 7-8 hours a day, potentially not in a proper and so they do have workstation assessments. They are supposed to have, we will supply kit and chairs, but not everybody's got a home office. So again, it's what can fit and how we can work with people. And of course, offering office space is an important part of that too. But is there more we could do? Again, of course, but I think there's a good coverage there and people have got plenty of support if they call out for it.
Okay, Councillor Pearson, then Councillor Rippingale.
Yeah, just very quickly, I was just seeing whether Lucy raised it, but I thought I would as you didn't. And that is that there is access to an employee assistance programme which has up to 6 counselling sessions. So that's something else that's delivered for stress-related absences. That's right.
Would you say that LGR and devolution is causing anxiety and stress within the organisation, and is there anything we could be doing to mitigate that?
So I think inevitably, yes, it will cause more anxiety at different levels. I'd say at sort of managerial, head of service, managerial, certainly at my level, there's an element of anxiety. What we're trying to do to mitigate it, I think that there's 2 things, and we've had a number of conversations as a senior leadership team, which is the group we call all our heads of service as well, and that is to make sure we are openly communicating with staff, but not over communicating. So there's something about the right level of communication, reassuring staff, and you know, Pam does this incredibly well and is always the face of webinars. We try to get round all staff, including those that can't do online sessions. And I think the other thing we've talked quite a bit about is the language we use as well, and being really careful not to catastrophise it. So trying to make it feel positive, which actually for most staff it will be. It will be positive. Most of our staff will carry on doing what they're doing in a bigger environment with more opportunities, potentially more potential for growth, and hopefully with more capacity in the longer term. So that's the sort of way we're trying to do it. As we get closer to it, inevitably there will be. The other thing we're trying to do quite a lot of work with is the managers, because again, if managers start to get anxious, that can filter into the way they behave. So we've had some coaching sessions, we've had a We've got some HR specialists that have come in already and started doing sessions with our managers about coping through change and helping equip them with the necessary sort of skills, because it's going to be a big change for a lot of people.
Okay, thank you for that. That sounds all very positive. Okay, right. Looking around the room for any other discussions around the KPIs. I'll just kick off and just mention that obviously a red light one is that we are not receiving as much council tax as we would hope to. I know it's a very small percentage, it's a fraction, but it's pretty fundamental. It might be that if there is some digital communications being prepared around people that are potentially facing financial challenges, personal challenges which might result them in leaving accommodation, it might be that there's some increased work we could just tie up in there. I don't know, because we want to collect council tax. Anyway, would anyone else like to jump in at this point and look at anything? Councillor Willits, I thought you might do.
Yes, Chairman, I have a sort of couple of points beyond page 25 where we go into the corporate plans rather than the KPIs. And my first observation is the lack of a KPI in regard to the report on climate change on page 33 onwards. Now, the KPIs that are there for climate change are mainly about waste and recycling, where there are some reasonably firm targets which we are exercising our staff on achieving those levels. But reading through the achievements on the strategic plan, and in particular climate change, there are lots of achievements there, but none of them seem to have a KPI associated with them. And it would seem a shame that so much work is being done, but it's all described in qualitative terms rather than quantitative terms. And it would be delightful to see a KPI on when the council takes an initiative, such as putting up solar panel here or a bit of insulation there, if it could be expressed in terms of the percentage carbon reductions in emissions for the whole of Colchester, or perhaps for the council, or just some method of measuring whether what is being done is significant or really insignificant, because a lot of the work being done under climate change, it's small stuff, a lot of effort's going into it, and the question is it making a real difference? And if it is making a real difference, we should be having a metric, a measure, KPI, to show just how well it's going. A sort of standardised measure, percentage reduction in the totality of Colchester's emissions, or something that's sensible. I don't know what it would be, it's not my specialist area. I just note that there's lots of activities going on where we get no feel for just how well it's working, other than in a flag-waving sense.
Mrs. Brebner, can you help us out?
So what I would say about the strategic action plan is that it is just that, it is actions rather than the specific KPIs. For each of those, there may be very detailed work that sits below that big, broad action that does have some more specific and quantifiable things beneath it. So for climate emergency, I would say the action plan itself will have a breakdown of some more specific things that I think have actually been scrutinised by Scrutiny. You did look at the action plan last year. So I think that's in a way that there is more detail. If there was any of these you wanted more detail on, we could get that for you. But by its very nature, the strategic plan, it's called a delivery plan, is more about the broad, what we're doing to achieve the strategic priorities. And I take your point. They're broad at this level, but there's a lot more detail sitting behind them all. So
if the information is available, it would, I think it would be useful to see some of it and see whether it can be turned into a meaningful KPI, which would stimulate even more efficient activity on the part of those dealing with the climate change programme. So at the moment, it's not measured in any way. Well, we don't see any measurements. And if there are measurements, if the work is being done, and every time we have a climate change project underneath the strategic plan, there is a measure of how much carbon is saved, and that can be related to just how well we're saving the planet in Colchester, then we should give consideration to presenting that as a formal KPI, so that's the only way we really measure things that are not financial in the council.
Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. I've never sat on environmental and sustainability panel. I know that, having observed that panel does get a lot of the detailed information that I think Councillor Willits is seeking here. So I would suggest, Dennis, that you have a look at their agendas, maybe go along to one of their committee meetings, because I'm sure that officers don't want to be replicating all of their reports to different parts, but it may be that there's a specific area that the Environment and Sustainability Panel is looking at that you want to scrutinise, and that's what you want to look out for, I would suggest.
Councillor McCarthy. You're on that panel still?
Yeah, I'm the chair.
Great.
So I was going to say, if I may, just jump in, and Councillor Pearson's absolutely right. So there is the delivery plan that I think we saw and then you saw shortly afterwards, or around that time. But we're trying to fill out, so I think we've gone back from 3 meetings to 6 meetings, unless I have been told something different, but I think we've gone back up to the 6. That being the case, we need to fill our work programme. So it'd be cool to maybe do some work around this and maybe set KPIs within that. So when we've got the delivery plan, we can, obviously you're welcome to come along as a councillor and speak and scrutinise it. But maybe there's some work we can do around that, perhaps in further detail. Because we kind of done, remember the policy panel that used to be around, and it got to the stage where it was a little bit ticking off work the Cabinet had been doing. I'd quite like the panel to be a bit more hands-on and be more hands-on, basically. So maybe there is something we can do around that. It was just to move the conversation on and say that maybe we can take that away over there.
Okay. Councillor Willits.
I'm happy to go along at Councillor McCarthy's invitation at some time, but I see myself as an expert in common sense, but not in how one sets meaningful KPIs which will propel forward the achievement of the council. I think that really needs someone who's schooled in that area to say this is an area where performance can be improved by sort of setting KPIs for climate change in a way that works, and I'm not sure that I see how you do it. So I'm happy to go along, but I think greater expertise than mine is needed to show how greater motivation can be brought to bear via the KPI process in that area. The other question that I have is on page 57, and for the life of me I can't remember what was on page 57.
Process housing, then.
Yeah, it's just process 57, sorry, cursor's not working. Yes, I'll do it from memory. Processing housing benefits, and that is, oh yes, that's the excellent chart where we are the great, we won the sweepstake there, and we process our housing benefit claims faster than any other authority in the known world, Chairman. And what my thought was there, if this is sort of a target for us showing that Colchester is absolutely wonderful and we can do it better than anyone else, then clearly we've won. But the question which then follows is there an additional cost in being first? And if, for instance, instead of doing it within 2 days, we did it in the average of 7 or 8 days, would there be a significant cost saving? Or is it just that with the same resource as every other authority in the world, we managed to do it in 2 days because of the way we're well organised? So is there a cost associated with having a a performance which puts us top of the league. Much as we all like being top of the league, are we actually paying more than we need to get this job done?
Yeah.
I can't answer that. So I think that's something that if Councillor Pearson can't, I'll go away. It's a shame Councillor Corey's not still here, because I think he probably would have been able to, because I seem in my memory, I can think this has come up before, but I'll find out.
A briefing note would be appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding from having shadowed resources over the last 12 months, and I know that Sam Preston and her team do an excellent job around all of this, that by processing the housing benefit claims in an efficient way, we actually reduce the cost, because you don't have people coming backwards and forwards saying, you know, what's happening with my housing benefit claim, what do I do next? They're not going to other services for support because the time is stretching. So the fact that we're doing that, I think from my limited understanding of what happens, Dennis, is it's actually more efficient and more cost effective. I'll take that away just to double check, but that would be my initial reaction.
Chair, just as a point of common sense. No, I think that one's, yeah, sorry. Is there a point to say that surely, as long as we're following the procedure and giving the amount of benefits that we need to be provided, then surely we're doing it in the most efficient way, because as long as we're following the procedure, then we wouldn't be overextending our. So in order to answer the question that I think Councillor Willis is trying to get at, it just effectively need to say, are we following the procedures correctly? Which I'm assuming that we are. Is that a sensible point?
I would think what you're asking is, have we got twice as many people processing the claims than we perhaps need to if the target, yeah. So that, around that. And my gut is no, because we just wouldn't have the capacity. I would say it's along the lines of what Councillor Pearson said. We've got some really good processes. We've probably got some very good identity, because a lot of the time it's the identification of extra documents, and we might have some really good processes, good system that allows us to do that swiftly. But I would also say there is absolutely a link to the things you talked about earlier about people not getting their benefits in time, not being able to pay their rent, losing their homes, so that whole link up, which is something why I'm pretty sure we've always found that to be really critical, that our performance is good there. And actually, I'm pretty sure years ago, most people performed the level. I just think it's slid in some areas for whatever reason. But it's a really valid question, and I'll go away and double check it.
Okay, I've got Councillor Summers, and then I'm going to just sense check the room, because it's gone past 7:30. I feel like we're getting towards the end today. I'm minded that we would perhaps just keep motivating forward and not take a 15-minute break. And you would like a comfort break? Oh, okay, sure. Bear with me. I have stopped writing things down, so I will take you first, actually, and then I'll have Councillor Summers.
So I've got two questions. Around the social procurement, when contracts are put out for tender, are they also sent out to social enterprises? So my thought process is Emmaus have launched a new decorating service, using that for our voids to bring down the cost, but also to increase the skills in the local area, which again benefits the economy. Again, with like catering for here, are we using social enterprises, and are we approaching them to bid for contracts, or is it just commercial?
Councillor Pearson, can you note that down for homework, sir?
Yeah, my understanding, but it's an area that I haven't yet had the opportunity to grill officers around. I'm hoping that happens Thursday morning, is that we are, but I'm not sure. I'm not convinced, from what little I know already, that we are doing enough to involve cooperatives, mutuals, social enterprises in our contracting. Sometimes, from my G&A understanding, when we've grilled about this, sometimes I think it's about who has the expertise out there to deliver what we want, without going through too many hoops to get what the council needs in an efficient and effective way.
And your second question?
So, I was wondering whether there should be a KPI around the increase of footfall numbers that are being brought in due to the activities of our events team. So I recently heard that 100,000 people more had come into Colchester because of the events that we'd been putting on, which I'd like to have some data on. Again, then this could be used to promote Colchester as an attractive place for retailers, more events to come, which then benefits the economy again. So I'd really like to see a KPI around that, just to understand how much we're spending on events versus how much footfall that's bringing in and how much that's bringing to the economy of Colchester.
Again, very quickly. So I'm not sure that having KPIs for economic development would be all that useful. But I do think it's imperative that you have the opportunity to look at what's happening in terms of economic development. And I would also say, when it comes to most of the events that we're talking about, you do scrutinise CCHL. And CCHL does report to governance and audit on a regular basis. So there is lots of information and detailed information coming out of the Commercial Holdings Company.
What I'd be really keen to understand then is how that information is then used to promote Colchester as an attractive destination, because it's all very well having the data, but are we feeding that to, you know, big event companies that, you know, run big festival, that kind of thing? Because we need to promote ourselves as a city now, and I think that data is really useful.
Can I suggest that we bring this up when we meet the portfolio holder, which is for culture, Councillor Lee Scaldis, because I think you're absolutely right. And for the record, I mean, we can all see the work that the Colchester events team are doing, and it's certainly very good soft power for the brand Colchester, the city of. Okay, thank you. I'm going to press on because I think we are coming towards the end. We have got some recommendations that have been noted, which is great. It's been a really useful conversation. Mr. Clark, do I need to do the formal stuff and read out? Councillor Summers, I did miss you, sorry, go for it.
Yeah, it was just literally going back to Dennis's comments on the climate emergency stuff, and one measure you can see how well we've been doing as a city is the reduction in the number of air quality management areas over the years, because I think we had, I think it was 4, and we're now down to about 1, which is just sort of like the Brook Street area. So that is one area where you can actually see that there has been positive movement in the fact that the air quality has improved so much in large parts of Colchester.
See the challenge with that, because I agree, and I was about to say that earlier to try and help Dennis out with this developing this metric. But the challenge to that is, of course, we're wrecking African landscapes to dig up the lithium to create the electric batteries, and so I think we need. I think this conversation is best had in the environment and sustainability panel, because it goes way beyond. It goes way beyond my comprehension.
Yeah, agreed.
But I'm not being facetious. I agree. It's a great thing. We've got better air quality in Colchester. Of course, we all want that. I used to live off North Station Road. I really wanted it when I was walking around with my baby in a pram, and it's getting better. But I'm alive to the impact that globally it's having, and I think we all need to be alive to that.
I mean, again, we lived on the same road, so my daughter I used to think she was having asthma, but as soon as we moved away from North Station Road, her nighttime cough cleared up, and it was purely down to the pollution in the area. So hopefully much of that air quality improvement is also down to people doing more active travel and not just buying electric cars. So.
No, very well, good. Very good. Okay, Mr. Clark, we need to formally do some action, don't we? 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. Do you want to explain to the panel, for the benefit of new folks here, what we need to agree on or not?
Yes, well, I've noted down the recommendations that the panel has made and approved to go forward to Cabinet and portfolio holders. So basically, we'll just be asking panel members to agree that 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 have all been carried out. So it'd just be by a show of hands.
Well done, Mr. Clark, unanimous. Well done, panel. Okay, that concludes that item 10. We've done a large chunk of the work programme in our conversations we had earlier with Mr. Short, but we of course also have to agree on the work programme going forward, some of which is a perennial matter. And it is worth noting, colleagues, especially new colleagues, that, you know, we're very, very keen here to look at everything and to be flexible and pragmatic. And we've been on a journey in recent years because sometimes we've packed a lot in. So sometimes we have to be honest about it and say, well, do you know what, we can't tackle those 2 items that night. It's 2 separate meetings. So it's in our gift, really. And we have another meeting this month coming up, which I'm looking forward to. Mr. Clark, do you want to give us a little précis of the work programme and what we need to agree or not agree on?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there's a couple of things I wanted to bring up. Firstly, just to mention the additional meeting, extraordinary meeting that's been scheduled for 19th of June to look at cinema operation at the Northern Gateway site. And I'll be seeking a briefing date for group spokespeople and reporting officers probably tomorrow, and I'll get that booked in as soon as we can. The other matter I wanted to just bring up is that we've had a bit of a shift around of items. We were due to get the Housing Revenue Account HRA review to come to this meeting. That's now scheduled for the 8th of July, so we're seeking panel's approval for that, and also the waste strategy update to that meeting. So it's going to be a hefty agenda for that evening. It has been suggested, and I'd like to get the panel's view on, for the HRA review, as members of Governance and Audit have expressed interest in that over the past year. If Mr. Chairman and panel, you'd be happy for us to extend an invitation for the members of G&A to join us for that.
Oh, well, that would be delightful if they would like to join us. I don't
Fantastic
have a problem with that. Deputy Chairman, is that okay with you?
Oh, yeah, I'm a Democrat, Chairman. I see the opinion of my colleagues. But remember, they're all barrack room lawyers.
I think we've got approval for that. And the last thing I wanted to bring up was just the point that in previous years we've had briefings from portfolio holders, scheduled meetings throughout the year, and we've managed to cover all portfolios during the year. And I just want to get the panel's view as to whether or not you wanted us to do the same for this year and schedule those in.
Well, if I may just leap forward and say, in principle, yes, but I think what we need to do a little more of is more questions, less presentations. Yeah. And I think that steer to give to the portfolio holders. I mean, actually, Councillor Pearson, you have led the exemplary example in making yourself available for scrutiny. Some of the meetings that I've personally been managing in the past, I didn't do a very good job of, but it was challenging when you had a half-hour presentation, sometimes for each item. So I think if we can give that general steer, if colleagues are okay with that, thank you, great. So in principle, yes, we would like to see the portfolio holders and their friends, because they sometimes do bring friends along. That's fine, but the friends also need to be reminded that we don't necessarily have the capacity for extensive presentations.
Are you suggesting that I don't have any friends, Chair?
Oh, no.
I think you were
had
called the
audience
gold
members
standard,
here earlier.
weren't you?
Yeah, you had audience members here earlier. Okay, right, good. Mr. Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So if I could just get a show of hands to seek approval for 2.1, 2.3 and 2.4.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Your hand is lingering, Deputy Chairman.
Yes, it is, Chairman. We have this secret meeting on the cinema on the 19th of June. Can I just give a personal view on what should or should not happen there? We have had several sort of strategic items come to us where the report deals very narrowly with a particular matter, and the panel tends to want to look at it in a wider context. So if, for instance, we're scrutinising the appointment of a cinema operator, we don't want to just see a list of 3 names with a tick against one of them, a brief statement of what due diligence has been done. The panel will be, well, I'll be asking, and hopefully others will also be looking at the context of with that particular appointment at that particular price, what does it mean to the finances of the council in a much wider sense? So does Northern Gateway still remain a great revenue earner for the council, or with these decisions is it being sort of reduced to just break even? Now, in the past, officers have been surprised when members of the panel have asked for the full financials to go around the narrow issue that they brought to the scrutiny panel. So I think it would be useful if we can minute at this stage that we will be expecting a presentation on the cinema, but we will expect it to also be put in the context of what it means to the council and council's finances, not just what it means to watching films in the north of Colchester.
Councillor Rippingale?
Mine's on a separate point.
Okay, before we do that then, so Mr Clark, if you've got that steer from the Deputy Chairman, and we will take that up with the monitoring officer and the reports and find out what we can do. But the principle is very good and sound, Deputy Chairman. Thank you. Okay.
Could I ask whether it would be possible to scrutinise the CBH management fee, given that it's come up quite a few times in full council? Because it would be good to put an end one way or the other to... I don't know what context you want to put that in, but I feel like that would be a good...
I think it's a very good idea, Councillor Willits.
Chairman, it must be an integral part of the presentation on the HRA, because the management fee and the two major components of the management fee are sort of a significant factor in the HRA. So it's a question for the panel: do we wish to take that as a narrow issue, which is it's a really interesting issue to look at? There's lots of info and benchmarking around it, or do we take it as part of the wider HRA?
Because my concern is where the HRA review and the race strategy review, that's going to be quite a meeting if we're going to look into the management fee as well. I just don't want, I want the time to be able to...
Can we try and to tackle it there, but then keep in our back pocket that we may need to do a separate item on it, if that's okay. And panel, just so you're aware, because I know some of you are new to the party, but this panel did state to Cabinet that we wanted to see a report on the future prospects for the Middle Mill Weir in Lower Castle Park before it goes to Cabinet. And this is an incredibly complicated area because you will probably know at the moment repair work is being undertaken to the bridge so that people can walk and cycle across that important thoroughfare in Lower Castle Park to Kings Meadows. Great stuff, but we still don't have a solution yet for the weir, which effectively is a bit of metal that keeps the water level up, or at least it did until it collapsed. And there are discussions to be had on either side of an argument, whether you let nature take over or whether you put the water level back up to where it's been for over 1,000 years. We also know recently that the impact of this is wider because it has impacted on the Victorian boating lake in Lower Castle Park, which is now going to get Harris fenced off for the entirety of the summer, which won't be a good look. So this is quite a complicated matter. We do need to have it in here, I believe, because there are potentially competing interests between certain wildlife and certain leisure boat users, for example. But I think that still is highly on my agenda as someone that has had a personal interest in the water for a long time, because I like it. All right. There's probably some capacity throughout the year for other things. Who knows? I mean, in the same, and I'm developing my theme here, but in thinking about the Victorian boating lake, you know, there are some folks that have said, well, why don't you just turn it into a kids' splash park? Well, actually, probably there's some challenges around doing that. I'll get to my point. There's some challenges around doing that because you have to manage water very carefully for safety reasons. And the logical place to put a splash park would be much closer to a municipal swimming pool, where it would be centrally managed. But then in the very long run, when you look at that site, you think, what's the lifespan of that site? Is this the best place for a swimming pool? So before we start getting excited about putting splash parks off Cowdrey Avenue, there is probably a wider conversation to be had around that site. So these are the kind of things that I think Scrutiny is a great place to have an open and honest conversation about before things get thrust upon Cabinet to make decisions. So if we could kind of keep an open mind to the year, I will do my best to be inclusive to all ideas, and we often talk outside of this meeting about what could go on the agenda. So please step forward and shout, and I'll do my best. On that note, Councillor Willits, you're going to have the last word.
Sorry about that, Chairman. Can I just find out what we're doing on these new items? Because there is a set procedure in item 9 in the minutes in which either members of the panel, 9A, or any member of the council has a statutory right to bring an issue to the panel. Are we going to do for those 2 items, very important items which have been brought up, will we be seeing an item 9 statement going to the clerk, or are we sort of somehow or another massaging it straight onto the work programme?
Yes, just to clarify, I think we've got approval from past meetings, certainly on the Middle Mill Weir item, that we've got approval to have it on the work programme as soon as we can schedule it. So I'll follow up with the reporting officer to see when we can get that on. So that wouldn't be an issue. I think we do need to bottom out regarding the CBH management fee, how you'd like to play that. If members are happy for us to take the attitude that we'll look at it as part of the HRA review, and then if there isn't time, we can, yes, put it on as a separate item in the future after.
Sorry, Chairman, they were spiffingly good ideas, and I didn't want to see them fall away, and it's sort of several months ahead. The argument is, well, no one put in a section 9 statement to the panel, so it isn't on the work agenda. Hard luck, just trying to avoid that and make sure we've got everything we want on the work programme.
I am very happy that when we get to that already approved item of Middle Mill, that there is a wide conversation had there around water and leisure water use, because I think we've got to have that wide conversation. There are unintended consequences of all these decisions. But there is time in the year if we want to look at anything specific as a consequence of that meeting, I think. I'll have the last word. Thank you very much. Safe journeys home. Good night.